Yo, what's up, y'all? You tuned in to DJ 11 and Matthew Africa up in the mix, baby. It's your boy Too Short. You already know what it is. We're gonna take it back to the old school. It's the best of Too Short. Bitch. I remember.
I'm Matthew Africa.
I'm DJ 11.
And we collaborated on a mixtape, Dirty Raps, the best Too Short.
We from the O, where you from, motherfucker?
We're from Oakland, so is Too Short, and he's a real cultural hero to us from way back. So
a myth, a legend.
First person to say the word bitch with more than one syllable.
Bitch.
More than one time.
bitch, make me rich.
We've both been mixing or listening to mixtapes forever, but you've been making them way longer than me.
That's right. Crazy ass. Album number 10.
Mixtapes have always been a really important part of hip-hop culture, you know, as a way to expose consumers to new music, a way for DJs to kind of create an identity for themselves. And it's, you know, it's typically for a way for DJs who are trying to get their name out there to do so, because you can't be in front of every person at any time. But if you make a mixtape which is really good, it will get bootlegged and it will get passed around, and your name will become known, and you will be interviewed in your bedroom about one that you did.
The main issue is we hope we don't hear from somebody else's lawyers. DJ Drama from Atlanta, originally Philly, is, I guess it's safe to say, the biggest name in mix CDs these days, at least in rap music. But 6 months or so ago, there was a raid. He was arrested, effectively treating him as if he was a pirate who was stealing rather than sort of helping to break and expose artists.
Best case scenario when you get caught is that a record label or, you know, a lawyer for a record label will send you a cease and desist order, which is basically a slap on the wrist saying, take this off the market, don't do it anymore, we're watching you. You know, you're big, but at the same time, it's kind of a compliment. Like, you're big enough that somebody has noticed what you're doing and will bother to slap you on the wrist.
Too short to hear what I say. I never do work, but I always play.
I think every mixtape starts with an idea, because there's a billion songs, and you got to start somewhere. How to narrow it down, sort of like what you're working with, whether it's a specific artist, a specific style of music, figuring out your theme. And then from there, for me, I go to trying to get a possible track list, like narrowing it down to 30, 40, however many songs.
You know, listening to things separately, coming up with our A list, our B list, our C list, narrowing it down to our A list, sitting down together and being like, okay, let's fuck with these 45 songs. The other side of that with Too Short is he has 14 albums, 15 albums?
16.
I'm sorry, 16 albums. I mean, that's at least 160 songs, but more like, you know, you're pushing 200. How do you wrap, you know, a dude around 20 songs around a dude who's put out 200? Like, that's a challenge. So that
especially when they're all kind of the same song. Too Short's particularly interesting because he's been recording since the early 80s, back to about 1983, which was before a lot of the modern studio techniques, like MIDI, what have you. And you can sort of trace the history of Bay Area rap from a production perspective through all his sounds over the years. Like, very early on, it was all drum machine based, and often he was rhyming over other people's records.
Chilling out by the bay, singing my rap. No MC could rock like that.
Later on, he was playing over loops of live funk bands, like the stuff that Ant Banks produced. And that has its own kind of weird rhythmic feel that's very different when you're trying to mix it.
Everybody's got that same old dream to have big money and fancy things. Drop a brand new beat.
And then more recently, you know, sort of the post-G-funk stuff, a lot of music with Southern producers like Lil Jon and Jazzy Faye, and some sort of hyphy sounding stuff.
I heard 93 rappers say bitch like me.
So, you know, it's one artist, but it's a whole lot of different production styles. And one of the challenges in making the CD was figuring out how to fit those things together, not only musically, but to mix them. Because, like, a record that's made 25 years ago does not pump generally the same way something brand new does.
We got the actual files from a lot of different places. A lot of it Matthew had on vinyl. Some of it I had on vinyl. Some of it he'd gotten on CD. Some of it I'd gotten MP3s from other people. A couple things I think we actually, at least the original version we were working around was something we downloaded off the internet. So once we had everything together, we got it into a file format which we felt most comfortable with. Our first choice was a 320 kilobytes per second MP3. Second choice would be a 192 kilobytes per second MP3. We would record as an AIFF, but then convert it to an MP3 just because it was easier to move the files around and quicker.
Once we'd narrowed it down to roughly, in this case, the 40 songs we were working with, we figured out the BPMs on all of them, manually or cheating a little bit. And we tried to figure out a song sequence, which, we collaborated on, and sort of we'd go back and forth because, you'd have a block of 4 or 5 songs where, wow, those would sound really great together and they fit together stylistically, but then how do you link that up to something else? I think a lot of the planning was really in terms of just figuring out how the arc of the mix went. That is sort of the energy level it starts at, the sound it starts with, and where it goes.
So once we got the overall arc of the tape, planned out at least, we had the song sequence planned out, we had a rough idea of what the transitions were going to be, we sat down and started recording it. Recording from Serato, going into Pro Tools, and sat down and actually started working out what the transitions would be.
Typically what we do is we'd figure out the tempos we're going to be playing the records at. That is, we start with this, then we're speeding up, so maybe the first record will record it a little faster than it actually is. Then the next record will beat match it and then record it at the proper tempo. And if we're off a little bit the first time, well, we can go back and make some little edits to make sure that all the beats line up and it sounds like a smooth segue. And also do things like EQ it to make it sound like one part is fading a little, or take some bass out, or do whatever to make sure that the two songs sound like they fit together.
Say how, yeah, you. Can I ask you a question?
Normalizing is like when you flatten JPEGs in Photoshop. It sort of collapses everything into a single set of files, and from there you go and create separate tracks, and then from that you move it to a CD burner and you create your master CD.
Multi-track digital audio recording program is all that you would absolutely have to have. So a computer in the program is all that you would have to have. The rest might be bells and whistles.
In the ghetto, you think life is hard. Food stamps and tow up cars. Wall to wall, dirty orange carpet. Sitting in a bucket, hoping you can start it. And ride around to the liquor store.
Save often. Don't delete shit until you're absolutely 100% positive. Don't get drunk and operate Pro Tools. If you move a Pro Tools session from one hard drive to another and don't have everything moved with it, it'll look in the old location for it, and you'll have to go back and find every single little file.